Research shows that when we're asked a question, especially about an opinion, we instinctively roll out a safe answer. We're testing the water to see how does this person that we've asked respond. Tom, some in the audience are probably a little skeptical, like, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I said, well, not in that rapid fashion. It's going to be a conversation. And I've discovered it's actually with the third and fourth question that I get to their gold nugget, their very best thought.
Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, we've got a topic to discuss that I'm really excited about, the power of leading with questions, and I'm delighted to have Bob Tiede as our guest to explore this topic. Bob has served with CREW, an international faith-based campus organization, for 54 years, spending the large majority of that time developing the next generation of leaders. He's the author of 6 popular free ebooks, including his newest book, Success Unlocked, The Transformative Power of Questions, which I've just recently finished. Bob also was co-author of the 3rd edition of this book, Leading with Questions, which is where I became familiar with his work. Additionally, for the past 13 years, he's operated his blog, leadingwithquestions.com, which is followed by leaders in essentially every country in the world. I'm delighted to have him with us. Bob, thanks for joining me today on the Science of Leadership.
Tom, it's my privilege, a great honor to be with you today.
Well, as we launch into our conversation, I need to admit something. I'm feeling a little bit, maybe performance anxiety, if you will. My job as the host is really to ask the questions and get the guests to share their stories and their insights, and also as somebody who's trained as a coach, to ask powerful questions. And so here I am asking questions of the guy who literally has written not only the book, multiple books on this idea. So, I'm feeling a little bit concerned with that. Please bear with me if my questions aren't as strong as they could be. But as my friend Jonathan likes to remind me from something from med school days, I'm just trying to learn here. So anyway, now that I've got that admission out of the way, let's really get into our conversation, if you will. Questions, I think, are something obviously that you're really passionate about. You've written about it. I mean, seven books and this highly successful blog that you've got. When you talk about leading with questions, what does that mean to you?
Well, Tom, let's back up just a little bit. I feel always that I need to start with the confession. And my confession is that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. My only paradigm of leadership was I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needed to be done. And then I did say benevolent. I grew up in a home where I was taught to say please and thank you. So, Tom, if you'd have been on my team, I don't think I ever would have said, hey, Tom, go do this. It'd been more like, hey, Tom, here's what we're working on. Really be great if you could please do this. But I still thought, I have to figure it out and then tell Tom what to do. And for me, that changed. I'm reaching over here in 2006 when I discovered the first edition of Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael McCourt. Now, I love books. I love leadership books. Probably every book I've ever bought or read, there's a morsel in there. But I had no idea when I bought this book that it would change my leadership forever. And Tom, what I'm trying to share here is I'm a Johnny-come-lately to this. If you said, Bob, what is your natural bent? My natural bent is to tell people what to do, kindly. But when I read Leading with Questions, I became a convert. It was like it just made so much sense that a leader who leads with questions would be more effective. And as I read that book, I had only one question. Why hasn't anyone ever shared this with me before? Tom, I'm going to go on a little rabbit trail here by asking you this question. Are you familiar with the hidden symbol in the FedEx logo?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yeah. 80% of the population have never seen it, even though we all have seen the FedEx logo. Now, I was part of that 80% until about a year ago when somebody pointed it out. There's an arrow at the bottom right between the E and the X. And once you see it, you'll never not see it. Well, you're wondering, okay, Bob, that's the FedEx logo. Where are you going with this? Tom, to date, I have not yet met a leader who has actually understood the concept of leading with questions and said, nope, not going to do that. The reason leaders don't lead with questions is they've never seen it. Yeah, we've all known from youth that there's questions and answers, but as a leadership tool, we've never seen it. And so once a leader sees that and realizes, wow, when I ask my staff, either one-on-one or around my conference table, hey, what do you think we ought to do here? Well, several things happen. First of all, there's a probability, not a guarantee, but a probability that in hearing all of their ideas, one of them might have an idea better than me. Again, not a guarantee, but 10 more ideas, and it's a probability. But then second, And Tom, I am no expert in emotional intelligence, but I understand enough to know, Tom, if you're on my team and, I said, "Hey, what do you all think?" And Tom shares an idea and I say, "Wow, Tom, love that idea. Tom, would you be willing to lead our team in executing on that?" Compare that motivation for you versus doing what Bob says. You might do what Bob says, thinking in the situation, well, he's the boss, he signs the paychecks. I don't think his idea is very good, but I better do what he wants. Versus empowering you to go with your idea. It's like when I say, Tom, love your idea. Would you be willing to lead our team in executing on that? Whose idea are you going to be executing, Tom?
Right. You're executing your own idea.
Yeah, yeah. And for a leader who understands that, wait a minute, I may sit there and think, I think my idea is still a tad better than Tom's. But if I let Tom go with his idea, I'm going to get 1,000% effort because his name's on the line, so to speak, because he's
Mhm.
executing his idea. Well, that's just a little bit how leading with questions can actually allow a leader to become so much more effective than the benevolent leader I used to be.
Yeah. Well, thanks for setting the stage with that, kind of demonstrating what that really looks like. Do you have a good story from your career that exemplifies what that looks like for us?
Sadly, many, many. We were putting together in my former role a huge humanitarian aid trip to Russia. We were taking over 100 tons of food, medicine, clothing, and we were going to be aiding the Russian military families. Well, we sent an advance team. We were doing something I had never done, and we're sending an advance team who had never done it. And I spent about a week writing a detailed plan of what they needed to do. And we had two teams, one in Moscow and one in St. Petersburg. The Moscow team actually collapsed
Mm.
because, gosh, who was that boxer who says everybody has a plan until you get hit?
Mike Tyson.
Mike
Yeah.
Tyson. Well, here I am writing a plan on something I've never done. The St. Petersburg team succeeded. Now, here's why they succeeded. We had that team being led by a retired Army colonel, and he understood the concept of commander's intent. In
Mhm.
other words, what was the objective? And he understood that. And when he saw the plan I'd written really wasn't working, he just discarded it and said, "But I know where we need to go. So let's figure it out together." And they figured it out together. But just a wonderful example of you got to involve the team, especially when you're doing something neither you or the team have ever done before. Tom, I'll ask you another question. How have you felt whenever you've had a leader ask, "Hey, Tom, what do you think we might do here?" Whatever the topic was. How did that make you feel?
It made me feel, empowered. That's a word people throw around a lot these days, but empowered, valuable, depending on who the person was. If there has to be authenticity to it, right? But
Sure, sure.
if that question was truly authentic, it usually takes me aback because it's like, here's this person who is in this role, who has all this capability, all this experience, and they're asking my, opinion on it. Wow, that's really flattering on some
Yeah.
level.
Without that leader, Tom, saying to you, "Tom, I value you. I think you have a brain. I think you can contribute here." Just by asking and listening, it communicated that. And I
Right.
always say to leaders, if that's how you and I have felt when we've had a leader ask us, how will staff reporting to us or our colleagues or clients feel when we ask them? Again, genuinely, not in
Yeah,
a manipulative way. People see through that. But
sure.
in a genuine way, again, they're going to feel valuable. Again, just some more of the reasons why a leader who leads with questions can be more effective. Uh, Tom, going down another thread here, a leader who thinks they need to have all the answers, that's a really heavy weight on their shoulders. And again, I know because I used to think as a leader I needed to have all the answers. And so when I was asked a question that I actually didn't know the answer for, guess what I was tempted to do?
Lie.
Make one up on the spot.
Yeah.
I had kind staff who never really called me out, but I'm sure some of them were thinking, I don't think Bob knew. I think he just made that up. And, another thing I share, Tom, is will your respect for a leader that you report to increase or decrease when they say, wow, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it increases because we see honesty.
Yeah. And we realize no one has all the answers. That leader, Tom, who when they don't know the answer says, wow, great question. I don't know the answer. When they do say they have the answer, you're going to trust that answer more. Tom, I say that today I'm actually prepared to respond to any question I'm asked. But my response has changed from making it up to, hey, Tom comes with a great question. I say, wow, Tom, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. What do you think the answer might be? Now, sometimes they actually have an answer, but other times they may say, well, Bob, I don't know either. That's why I came to you. And I say, well, again, great question. How could we find out the answer? And generally, they have some ideas. Well, so and so might know, or I could Google it, or AI it, or there's a book on this, or whatever. And I'll say, wow, could you go do that research and come back with what you find, because it will be helpful to us to know the answer to your great question.
Yeah.
Well, again, with just that in my mindset, I am prepared not to answer, but to respond to any question I'm asked. And it takes all the pressure. A leader doesn't have to feel like I've got to have all the answers. I've got to make them up when I don't know.
Yeah. Bob, that's great stuff. We get in there and people would walk away with so much wisdom, but there were several things that you were saying that I wanted to kind of hit on. The first thing was this idea of leaders carrying this weight of expectation that they have all their stuff together, that they know all the answers. In my book, I actually write in there, everybody else knows you don't have all the answers. The
Yes.
reality is the people that you're leading, they know you're not perfect. They know you don't have all the answers. The only person that you're fooling is yourself, right? When you do that. But in that moment when you say, I don't know, let's find out together. How could we find this out? That changes everything. People respect you more. They trust you. They know that, as you said, when you do present an answer, hey, I can trust this. I was reminded as you were kind of going through it, when you asked me, would I be more inclined to engage in something that was my sort of question and the thing that I was wanting to do. So when I work with trainees in academic medicine, so we have people who are training to be different, specialists and so forth. And when I've worked with them to mentor them in research, there are certain people from my career in the distant past who I approached and said, "Hey, I have this idea for a research project," and they were offended that I would even approach them that thinking that I could present an idea, right? And so then I steered around those people and worked with people who would help me with those things. But what I've discovered is if you want to be frustrated beyond belief, try to impose a project on somebody that they're just having to do because they're trying to check a box. My approach has always been when they come to me, what are you interested in? What would you like to do? Here's some things that we could explore. Any of these interesting to you? What question could you ask? They take that on, then they've got the energy. I don't have
Yes.
to be on them all the time. Like, are you doing your work? Have you started your paper? All this sort of stuff. It decreases the amount of energy that I have to activate
Yeah.
on to such a degree. And that's how I think you can be so much more efficient as a leader if you empower those people and just use their natural interests and abilities, then you don't have to do their job and yours too.
Oh, Tom, that is so good, so wise. I mean, it reeks of emotional intelligence, of just understanding how people are wired. One of my friends says that when you tell your staff what to do, they may write it down. They may write it down. They may even remember it. They may even try to do it, but they'll never own it. When you ask, "Hey, Tom, what do you think we might do here?" and you allow your staff to come up with the answer to that, they own their answer. It just makes a world of difference, as you say, in their motivation and you not having to be on them because they're executing their idea.
Yeah. Hey, I'm breaking into the podcast conversation here to share with you an exciting announcement. If you've been following the Science of Leadership podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about the book I've been working on. Well, I'm delighted to share that after over 3 years of work, my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is finally available. I'm so proud of this book and what it represents. I'm certain that you're going to find it immensely interesting and helpful as a guide on your journey to becoming a better leader. Seriously, you don't want to miss this book. I'm including a link to the book in the description. I hope you'll order your copy today. And please share it with others who might be interested. Also, please be sure to share your thoughts about the book with me. Now, let's get back to this interesting conversation on the science of leadership. Another thing that came to my mind was, and I'm kind of hit on this earlier, coaching, right? Executive coaching, and there are leaders out there who are listening who've had coaches, and the reality is a good coach doesn't need to know anything about your field or much about any like the issue you're dealing with right now. We don't need to know that. All we have to do is be able to come up with a question that helps you unlock the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that can make such a huge impact on people, and that's peek behind the curtain. That's all coaching is, folks.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I share the essence of coaching. It's a bit, I realize we all use, GPS today. But in the old days, when we determined here's where I want to go and we got out the map, and to navigate a map, and GPS, you have to do the same thing, but it does one thing for you, but you have to determine where is it I want to go. And then the second question is, well, where am I at now? And, sometimes again, in the old days prior to navigation, we'd get lost. We'd stop at a 7-Eleven or gas station and walk in with our map and say, I'm lost. Where am I? And they always looked at me like a little bit crazy. Well, you're at 7-Eleven, sir. No, 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 I understand that. I'm trying to get here, and but I don't know where I'm at now. And they'd say, oh, you're right here. And based on that, you can then again figure out how to get from here to there. But in coaching, first question is, where do you want to go? Second question is, where are you at now? Third question is, well, what's your plan to get from here to there? And then in my coaching, I like to say, okay, that's one option. What would be four more? Let's get five options on the table of how you can get from here to there. Now, they're not going to do all five, but once my research has shown that often the first two suggestions are things they've tried that haven't worked. When you
Uh,
force them, so to speak, to expand to five options, you help them plow new ground. And then once five options, so which one do you want to go with? And I may be looking at my watch and saying, yeah, we have a few minutes left. Can we confirm our next coaching time? And then what steps do you want to take between now and that next coaching time to start making progress? You may not, if we're coaching every 2 weeks, you may not get to the destination in 2 weeks, but what steps do you want to take between now and 2 weeks from now to make progress? To me, that's the essence of coaching. And Tom, just like you say, I don't actually have to be an expert. You're a doctor. Good grief. I wouldn't know anything. I don't know anything about your field. But I can say, where do you want to go? Where are you at now? What's the options to get from here to there? Which one do you want to choose? And in the next 2 weeks, what steps do you want to take?
yeah, exactly. And when we invite others that were those that were leading to think about things in that manner from that standpoint, we can help them grow so much more and be so much more effective in their roles, and that all improves the outcome for our team, our organization, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, one of the things I share a lot of things, but one of the things I love about leading with questions is so many of the greatest questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated questions where you think, how in the world would I ever be able to remember to ask that? Whenever I speak, I ask, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds? Well, every hand goes up. And I always pick out someone from the audience, invite them up. Tom, you're my audience today. So I invite you up. And I always say, as that person comes up, I chose Tom because I think he has a photographic memory. He's only going to have to hear my four favorite questions one time. You'll have them memorized. And they always look like I don't think so. And I said, trust me, you do have a photographic memory. And I say, here's how it's going to work. I have a second hand on my watch. The clock will start when I say my first favorite question, and I'll share it. When I've shared all four, I'm going to say, do you have them memorized? You will. And then I'll say, share them with us. And upon you sharing all four successfully, the clock ends. So, Tom, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Here we go. Tom, my first favorite question is, what do you think? Second, what else? Third, what else? Fourth, what else? Do you have them memorized?
Yes, sir.
Share them with us.
What do you think? What else? What else? What else?
Oh, we've just set a new world record, 13 seconds. Didn't even take 30. Now, Tom, some in the audience are probably a little skeptical, like, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I said, well, not in that rapid fashion. It's going to be a conversation. And Tom, on that first question, you're going to add the topic. Hey, what do you think we ought to do about something?
Mhm.
And when you ask, you're going to get an answer. Now, before I understood this, I thought cycle complete. I ask a question, I get an answer, end. What I didn't understand is that research shows that when we're asked a question, especially about an opinion, not just a little factual question, but an opinion, we instinctively roll out a safe answer. We're testing the waters to see how does this person that we've asked respond. So, Tom, if I asked you, what do you think about, and you gave me that first answer, I said, well, Tom, that's stupid. Everyone knows that. You're sorry you answered. In fact, I'm going
Right.
to get nothing more, but next time I'm going to get nothing at all. But when I say, wow, Tom, that's good. What else? Well, you relax, think, wow, the person who asked me appreciates what I'm sharing and you'll give me more. And when you give that second answer, I still know, don't move on yet, Bob. I grab a pen many times, say, Tom, I got to take notes. This is pure gold. Please continue. And I've discovered it's actually with the third and fourth question that I get to their gold nugget, their very best thought. And Tom, remember the promise of this was, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds? For a listener out there who says, yeah, I just tell my staff what to do. Really, with just these four questions in their next staff meeting, one on one or with several staff around their conference table, whatever the topic is, by just saying, hey, gang, what do you all think? and then listen, say, wow, that's good. What else? And what else? Just with these four, you can move from being a leader who leads by telling to a leader who leads with questions. It's that simple. And don't be surprised if your staff are amazed.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. Some of this approach actually shows up in, I just recently have been going through training to become a trainer for this process that we have at our university to improve physician interaction with patients. So I'm going to be training our faculty and staff members and so forth on this through the Academy of Communication in Healthcare. And one of the key components is this idea of what else?
Yes.
What is it that you're here for today? What's your main concern? And they tell you your main concern, and you go, "Well, what else?" Okay, what else? And what else? Until you've exhausted it, right? And they list out all their
Yep.
concerns, and you say, "Okay, of those, we can't cover 7 things in the 30 minutes or whatever. What are the ones that are really most important to you?" And it helps to focus everything. It helps everybody get on the same page.
Yes.
So it's a valuable technique.
Tom, and it is so valuable. Let me just share a little insight there because the and what else is the right question versus is there anything else? If you ask that, you're likely to get a no, or it can be answered with yes or no. If they say yes, obviously you can go further. But when you say and what else, it can be answered with a no. And so you're absolutely asking the right question. I'm just adding for our listeners, don't confuse what else with is there anything else? Those are two
Yeah,
different questions. One is
they
great,
are.
one's not so great.
Yeah, and the specificity that you're providing with that as we think about questions, is there anything else is so much longer. What else? 2 words. What
Yes.
else? Right? 2
Yes.
words. In coaching training, the powerful questions are usually less than 7 words, and
Yeah.
yeah, the less that we a lot of times I think as lead especially in academics, golly, we're so bad about this. In academics, we feel like we have to qualify every single thing we say, and we have to structure this statement with all this buttressing, you know, to the point that it gets to be useless or nobody can follow it. If you can just cut straight to the chase, and that's what we're talking about here with these questions, they're so much more powerful.
Can I add another thing that's
By all means,
equal? If you're gonna lead with questions, what else do you have to do?
listen.
Listen. Yes. Now, we all know that, but one of the things I also share when I'm speaking is, who here would like to become a better listener in 8 seconds? We had 30 seconds to learn to lead with questions. This one's even shorter. And again, hands go up. And I say, well, what sport has an 8-second clock? Tom, do you know?
Bull riding.
Bull riding. Yes. And now, how long is 8 seconds to a bull rider?
When you're on a bull, it's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, you don't have to be a fan of the sport, but if you've ever been flipping channels and just watch a little bit, you quickly realize it looks like 80% of these bull riders are knocked off in less than 8 seconds. And we're talking about professionals. You and I are actually too smart to get on a bull. And but people say, okay, that's bull riding. What? Well, I thought you said listening. Well, here's what research shows: the average person, when they ask a question, only waits 2 or 3 seconds for an answer. That silence seems like an eternity. And if they don't answer in 2 or 3 seconds, again, this isn't conscious, at an unconscious level. If they don't answer, we feel like we got to fill that silence with words. So we either answer the question ourselves, ask another question, or just move on with complete unawareness of what we just done. And so the 8-second rule is ask your question, keep comfortable eyesight, not intense, but comfortable, and count to yourself. 1001, 1002, 1003. There's times, Tom, I've gotten to 1030. The longer the silence, actually, the better the answer. They will answer. And don't interrupt their thinking with words. Now, Tom, maybe you, some of your listeners today might actually later today be annoyed at what I just shared because up to now they've been unaware. But later today, they're going to ask somebody a question, and at 3 seconds, they're going to pop in and start talking, and then they're going to remember, and they're going to think, oh, darn that TD, I wish he'd never told me this. Well, Tom, it still happens to me occasionally. And when I realize I've just violated the 8-second rule, I'll say, time out. My bad. I asked you a question. I didn't even give you time to answer, and I started talking again. Please forgive me. Here's the question again. This time, you take whatever amount of time you need. I've never had anyone be ungracious when I did that. And so I'm just confessing again, occasionally I violate it and have to call my bad on myself, call a foul on myself, and then move on.
Well, I think being aware of that, being conscientious, when we do that, when we give that space, it shows that we actually have genuine interest And I think that's fundamental to the success of this is ask the question and be genuinely interested in the answer. Um, if we're not, then we're just gonna torpedo the whole operation.
Yeah. There's another little tip there is that if we're genuinely listening to their answer, there's almost always something in their answer that we could ask the next question about. Not to make it an inquisition, but to find out more. And, I could only imagine in your world talking to a patient, but you say anything else? No, no, wrong question. What else? And they share something, and you say, okay, say more about something they
Mhm.
just mentioned. In other words, you're digging a little deeper rather than assuming that just hearing that first statement that you completely understand what that symptom or issue is. And maybe they share another thing in that answer that you say, oh, hey, that's interesting. Could you say more about this? And it's just once you see this, it's a technique, but once you see
Mhm.
it, it's really easy to ask the second and the third, sometimes the fourth question to help you actually understand fully what they've said and rather than making the assumption that you asked the question, got their answer, now you completely understand what they're trying to say.
You know, as you said the word assumption, I was struck by so often we lead with assumptions as opposed to leading with questions. And so what happens often, this happens in my so many physicians I know have had this occur where there's a complaint that is listed, the reason they're supposedly coming to see you. And so you go into the room usually with this assumption. Again, this is outside of the training that I'm doing
Sure.
and leading. So generally people go in with this assumption. Okay, here's why they're here. I'm just gonna drill on that, right? And and it turns out that a lot of times that's not the case. So when you ask, what's your biggest concern today? Why are you here? What else? What else? What else? Frequently what will happen is if you started just, let's say, with chest pain, if you said, "Oh, I see you're here for chest pain. Let's talk about chest pain." They'll tell you about chest pain. But if you say, "What is it you're really here about? What else?" etcetera, and you don't lead with assumptions, often they will say, "He's just really needing to get a sports clearance thing for, soccer, and he bumped into a pole, like, 3 months ago, and his chest hurt, and the doctor said they wouldn't clear him until he got a thing from you." Okay, well, that's a
Yeah.
totally different conversation, right?
Yes. Yes.
That you may have missed entirely, had you not been open to genuinely asking and listening for what they were, offering and so forth. So, yeah, I think that's so valuable, and then continuing to tell me more. What can you tell me more about that is such another a valuable thing. Do you have a good example that you can draw on from your files of that demonstrates how valuable that is, where really asking these questions was highly important to the success of a group?
Let me share another example of the power of asking questions. Navy Captain Michael D. Abersoff, when he took over the USS Benfold, one of our nation's most modern warships. I don't know how the Navy measures morale, but the morale on that ship was the lowest of some 300 vessels in the U.S. Navy. And 18 months later, under his command, retest of morale went from worst to first, the highest of all ships. How in the world did he do that? Well, he did a bunch of things, but the first thing he did upon taking command is he set up 300 15-minute meetings one-on-one with the 300 sailors. And in those meetings, he asked them three questions. Tom, you're going to love these because you'll have them memorized upon hearing them one time. Like you say, they're so simple. As he met one on one, he asked them, what do you like best about this ship? What do you like least? What would you change if you could? Now, at the end of the first day, he might have only met with 10 or 15 sailors, but there was a buzz on the ship. The new captain, he's different. And now it didn't take long, and he's hearing things repeatedly and thinking to himself, what do you mean that's not being done on this ship? We're going to fix that. And of course, he did not promise to make every change that every sailor suggested, but he heard. But when he began to announce changes where he pulled the whole crew together, guess who he gave credit to for the ideas? The sailors.
Sailors.
Imagine you're a sailor on that ship. He says, Tom Collins, stand up. Tom, when you met with me, you shared this idea. We're going to implement that. Thank you, Tom. Now, I don't know exactly how tall you are, Tom, but how tall would you have felt at that moment?
I mean, 10 feet tall.
Yeah. And at first opportunity, I mean, you're out on a ship, so I don't know how easy it is to either call mom or the wife, but at first opportunity, who you calling?
Yeah.
Mama. And you're saying, Mom, you won't believe this. Wow, mom, buttons are bursting. And as soon as you get off the phone, mom's calling 10 of her friends. Hey, Tom just called me. Guess what? He shared an idea. The captain called, had him stand up. They're implementing that. Well, you just hear that story and you realize, well, of course, morale on that ship had to increase.
Yeah.
And just the value again of drilling deeper, getting to the issue. And like, as we said, the what else's and the what else's get to their gold nugget. There's the proverbial, I'm sure it's proverbial, but story of the old gold miner who mined for gold all of his life, looking for the gold vein. He finally quits. Someone comes along later and discovered he was within 6 inches when he quit. Well, if you only ask somebody, hey, what do you think, and get their first answer and move on, you're a bit like that old gold miner. You got close, but it's the what else's. Tell me more. Help me understand. Say more about that. That gets to their gold nugget, that very best thought that allows you, whether it's, an idea for improving the business, the practice, the organization, or you're drilling down to help understand what the issue is with somebody. It's those things that get you there.
Bob, I know you talked a bit about some of your research. I wanted to toss in some of the research on this, the studies that have been done across some various fields that really looked
Please.
at this. But when leaders ask questions in a host of different fields, it's been shown to improve team performance and outcomes. When we as leaders ask for the input of those we lead, we're explicitly inviting that input, which is at the heart of this idea of inclusion, right? When we hear about people talking about inclusion, when we feel included, it creates psychological safety, and we've covered that idea numerous times on the Science of Leadership here. Psychological safety improves engagement, and that leads to high performance. And that's the heart of this, the idea of what's called participative leadership, where we seek the insights and inputs of those we lead. And Wong and colleagues actually published an extensive literature review in 2022 on participative leadership, and we'll link that in the comments below, or just the description below. It'd also be worthwhile to note that this idea of asking questions I mentioned earlier at the heart of coaching, really, when we look at workplace coaching, studies have shown it's associated with increased positive organizational outcomes. And then last thing I think I would mention is Karen Huang and her colleagues found that when we ask questions, people tend to like us more.
Oh,
So just from a practical
yes.
standpoint,
Yes.
it's a lot easier to work with or to follow people we like. So those are some, things that, and I could go on about other studies that have been done, but those are some of the studies that come to mind and that we'll share in the description of the value when leaders ask questions. Again, seeking honest answers, genuinely listening to those that they're leading.
Yeah. I appreciate what you just shared there. Another thing along that line is I'll put up two decision-making processes. Now, they each have three boxes, so they're very simple. Decision-making process one is leader makes decision, leader informs staff, leader asks if there's any questions. Decision-making two is leader calls staff together to say, we're thinking of making changes in this area. What things should we be considering? In other words, they ask questions up front, then leader makes decision, then leader informs staff. And I say, well, what's the difference? Well, it's when you ask. And I always share I have skin, knees, and knuckles from having used decision-making process one. You make a decision, you call the staff together, you ask if there's any questions. Now, you think their questions will be about executing the plan, but instead you hear, well, Bob, did you think about, did you consider? And you realize many times, no, I never thought about that. But you're then between this rock and a hard place. Do you collapse and say, okay, we'll go rethink it, feeling like a week later, or do you say, no, we've made the decision? But I point out, if you use decision-making process two, you're going to hear all this stuff up front, which actually will then allow you to make a better decision because you will actually take into consideration. And then, Tom, some research we found that's really fascinating is that the majority of people, not every single person, but the great majority of people will actually support a decision opposite of what they suggested if they were given an opportunity to give input prior to the decision being made. And I found that incredibly fascinating. Now, again, leaders, be careful. Don't think, oh, if I just ask up front, I can then do whatever I want. And they'll agree with me. They're going to see through that. But again, in a genuine way where you've sought input, then made a decision. And staff understand, hey, with all of us here, no decision is going to be exactly what everyone wants. But the fact that they're asked up front, they feel valued. And again, Tom, the things you've shared on just the research, we all know, we've all heard people don't actually leave jobs. They leave bosses,
Mhm.
supervisors, who they had to report to. But when that supervisor is saying, hey, Tom, what do you think we ought to do here? And listening and valuing, and it's part of just how they function. it's like you say, you end up feeling like, wow, I like my boss. Is he or she perfect? No, but neither am I.
Mhm.
But but wow, I feel valued here. And so it doesn't mean you'll never leave, but you're not leaving because, hey, life's too short to put up with this guy.
Yeah. Well, as you're sharing some of those practical tips, I noticed over your right shoulder, at least for those who are watching the video, for those who are on audio, Bob's got books behind him, and one of the books is "Now That's a Great Question," and a lot of these tips are in that book. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through it. It's another good book that you may want to get and read, put on your shelf. With regard to this sort of information that we're talking about today, as you were talking, I was thinking about as you were talking about when to ask, right? When I was interviewing the four-star generals and admirals for my research and for my book, the Four Stars of Leadership, General Ed Eberhart, who eventually went on to be the commander of NORAD, was telling, he told me this story of a time when they had to meet a time requirement to be able to get these jets outfitted with certain equipment, and they just couldn't do it. They couldn't do it, and it was the requirement by the Air Force. Like, this is the reg. Everybody's supposed to be able to do this, and so all these leaders and these high-ranking officers are sitting around trying to figure out, like, and one guy just says, "We can't do this. It's not possible," right? And this went on for I don't know, a couple days or something. And Eberhart finally said, "I'm going to go down and ask the airmen that are the maintenance guys and the people that are logisticians
Yeah,
and all these people, and I'm going to say, hey guys, what we need to do to make this happen?" And one of the airmen was like, "Oh, all we got to do is this, and it'll be fine." And he said, "Well, if you knew that, why didn't you say something?" He said, "Because nobody ever asked me."
yeah.
The answer was right there for this major problem, right? And nobody ever took the time to ask him. So, what are we as leaders, what are we missing? Our people that are there on the front lines, they know a lot more than we give them credit sometimes, usually. And what are we missing that all we got to do is ask?
Well, there's another story. A couple years ago, we took a group of our leaders in Orlando on the behind the scenes leadership tour of how they make the magic at Walt Disney World. And I was looking forward to this day because we're going to places that, guests don't normally go to, the underground under the Magic Kingdom at Epcot Center, where they call them cast members, come to change from their civilian to their costumes. It's not a uniform. But the first stop they said is we're going to Walt Disney World Laundry Services. And I thought, oh my goodness, that doesn't sound fun. I mean, I hope this stop is short. Well, it turned out it was the best stop of the day in terms of what we learned. They said we were doing such a bad job. We were experiencing 85% annual turnover among those who were coming to work at the laundry services. And then we got new management, and new management began to ask questions. Now, they said the morale was so down in that place that at first the cast members were not responding in laundry services. It's like, hey, they were asking, what could we do to improve your job, to improve your work conditions? What could we do better? And the cast members thought this is a trick. If we say anything, they'll fire us. But over time, they finally convinced. Well, when the staff members begin to answer, again, unlike management concern that, they're going to say triple our wages and do this and that. No, they said it's hot in here. Is there any way that each of us could have an air conditioner vent blow directly on us? Well, management heard that and thought, well, sure, that makes sense. Their second request was we do a lot of folding, and only a few of us is this table the exact right height for how tall we are. Those that are shorter are having to reach up. Those that are tall are having to lean down. Is there any way this table could be adjusted so that we'd all fold at the right height? Again, management thought, well, sure. Again, it's like your general story, going down and actually talking to the people who fold, who do the job, and and they asked for other ideas. And another idea they had was, well, could we spend a day, each of us, actually working with one of the housekeepers because we load their carts here with towels and sheets and everything they need, and they're taken. But we've never actually seen how they're used in making up a room. Well, again, it was like, well, that's a great idea. And when they went and worked a day with a housekeeper, they said, oh my goodness, we're loading this cart wrong. We could load it in a different way that would make it better. Again, housekeeper to laundry person, not
Yeah.
up here, there. And well, fast forward today, annual turnover is less than 15% in Walt Disney Laundry Services. People come and spend their whole career there. All happened when management began to ask questions. What could we do to make your job easier? What idea do you have that would allow us to serve our guests better? And it changed everything. I think that'll change any organization. It's asking and listening, and then being willing. Again, you don't have to respond to every idea you hear, but when you begin to, in many cases, you'll hear things and think, "Oh my goodness, how did we miss that?" Yeah, we can do that. And when people feel heard, again, they then feel valuable, and it's like, okay, I'm in a good place. I like it here.
Yeah. Bob, that's a great story. I think a great way for us to end out what I think has been an excellent podcast conversation. Um, it's been enlightening, encouraging, fun. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for being with me today on the Science of Leadership.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.